Welcome to this presentation on the Identification Division, Load Libraries, and Documentation. The Identification Division is the first of the 4 COBOL divisions, and it is always coded. Load libraries are connected to the Identification Division. We'll look at that. And documentation begins with the Identification Division, and it is extremely important. COBOL has become a fairly robust language, and it has been around for quite a while, and documentation has kind of come to have certain standards within the industry, especially in COBOL, and we're going to look at that documentation. My name is Mary Abdil, and I will be your instructor. If you have any questions about any of the information covered in this presentation, please use the question and comment box that appears on your screen. Our module topics are coding the Identification Division, connecting the Identification Division with load libraries and CSECTs. CSECT is a control section, and self-documentation of our COBOL programs. The Identification Division is the first division, and it may be abbreviated as ID Division. Down here you see the fields, the paragraphs that you can put within the Identification Division. The first one, the program ID, is the most important. You must code that. I coded REPT01 here. This becomes the external name by which the machine language will be known, that is, by which the load module will be known. In our previous module, we coded the program ID as math, M-A-T-H. Optionally, you can code author, which I did, installation. You can name it whatever your company name is or leave it out. Date written, I would strongly recommend, because that indicates how old or new this code is. Date compiled. Notice I did not put a compile date in there. When this is compiled, the compiler will actually add the date that it was compiled. So if you look at the output source listing, that is, when you run your compile and link JCL, and you look at the output listing of your COBOL code, you will see the date there. For security, I coded none. That is pretty much an installation standard. The installation that you have, the company will have certain levels of security, and they will indicate what you should put in there, or leave it out if they don't have a standard. Control section name. When you code your source program, in this case I said my PGM, I coded the member name in my source library as my PGM. I also coded the PGM ID as my PGM. They don't have to match. I recommend that they do. When you compile and link your COBOL program, you put the load module into your load library. The internal name in that load module is myPGM, taken directly from the program ID. Because that's the internal name, I would strongly recommend that you make the external name, that is the member name of your load library, the same thing. If they are different, there are reasons perhaps for making them different, but for right now, if you make them different, it will probably give you grief. Let's look at documentation. Blank lines. Lines that are completely blank. By coding occasional blank lines throughout your code, you make it more readable. One of the reasons for coding blank lines is to sort of divide groups of code up. So you can see that one group of code is related, then there's a blank line or more blank lines, and then another group of code. Generally speaking, people put blank lines before each of the divisions. So before the Environment Division, there are 2 blank lines. Before the Data Division, there are several blank lines. Before the Procedure Division, there are several blank lines. Also before each of the O1s in your Data Division, generally a few blank lines, at least one. And generally before each paragraph in your Procedure Division, there will be blank lines. So we can put blank lines into any of the 4 divisions, and we do it to make our code more readable. Comment lines are used to document or highlight code. Any line with an asterisk or slash in column 7 is a comment. Generally speaking, people use an asterisk, and we don't use slashes anymore. The rest of the line consists of any of the 256 EBCDIC characters. EBCDIC stands for Extended Binary Coded Decimal Interchange Code. And it is the encoding sequence or encoding standard that says we take a particular character, like a 5 or a letter G, and what are the binary bits that we use to represent that on a mainframe. EBCDIC is the encoding standard for a mainframe. We contrast that, of course, with the ASCII encoding standard used on most PCs and the Internet. The slash, which we can also code in column 7, ejects the source page. Because that only works on a mainframe printer and does not work on LAN printers or local printers, we generally don't use the slash anymore. In the good old days, we printed on a mainframe printer. But now most people will download their source to a PC and then print on a LAN or local printer. And the slash is simply not recognized as an eject. Let's look at some more about comment lines. It's easy to get carried away and just write too much. You want to avoid clutter when you write. You want to separate your comments from the code. One of the problems is when people write comments and it looks very much like code, when you're reading through the code, the comments will be very distracting. For example, display is a verb. If you start your comment with the word display, it looks like you might have been coding something that was a verb and not a comment. If, read, display, move, these are all verbs. Avoid starting a comment with a COBOL verb. One way to separate your comments is to enclose in a box. Another way is to use mixed and lowercase if you are coding the rest of the program in uppercase. Of course, you could code the entire program in mixed and lowercase, and then that doesn't help you, but it is an option if the program is in uppercase. If the comment is short, you can right-align them, because most of your code will be more towards the left side of the screen, and this way it gets it out of the way of your line of vision. And another way is to code several asterisks, 2 or 3 or 4 in columns 7, 8, 9, and 10. By doing that, it makes it clear that it's a comment. The single asterisk in column 7 is often not seen when you're scanning quickly through your code, because the code may not just be starting in 12 but over in 16 or 20, and that single asterisk is very far away. So coding a number of asterisks makes it stand out more as a comment. Let's look at some examples. First, comment boxes are so common, let's make a comment box in a separate member, and every time we want to use it, we copy it in. So I'm going to make a member called box. It's going to be a member of my class.cobol, and it's going to contain what you see in this red box. In other words, in columns 7 and 8, it's got a double asterisk. Over here in columns 70 and 71, it's got a double asterisk. And then it's got a line of asterisks all the way across at the top and all the way across at the bottom. Whenever you want a box for asterisks, you simply copy this box into your source code as follows. In ISPF, edit option 2, edit your program. With your program up, type an A or a B over the left side, one of the lines, as to where you want to copy this box into. A for after, B for before. At the top, where it says the primary command are to be typed, type copy box. Press enter, and this box will be copied directly into your COBOL program. Then you can simply type into the center of it whatever comment you want. Makes it a lot easier, and it standardizes the size of your box. If you don't have enough lines in here, just type an R to the left of any one of these double asterisks, and it will repeat that line, and you can have more lines in which to type comments. Let's look at some typical types of comments. One kind of comment is the initial comment, which describes all of your program interfaces and the basic processing of that program. Some typical headings that are in this comment box are purpose or description, in which you describe everything that that program is going to do, why that program was written. Another typical heading is input files. So you would describe what input files this program is going to be processing. It might input an employee file. It might input a transaction file and a warehouse master file. Might input a lot of different files, or perhaps just one. List and identify each of those files. What are the output files? The output files could be an updated data set or an update to your database. It could be a report or several reports. It could be a good report and an error report. Describe all the outputs and describe them by name. If you're using MQ, message queuing, describe the names of the classes that are being used for MQ. If you're writing a CICS program, describe and name each of the objects that your program is using, the PPT, the PCT. If you're using DB2 or Oracle tables, describe the names of those tables. And what is most important, describe and list a history of revisions. This is your maintenance or history of revisions, and it lists by date the name of the person and a description, a brief description of the changes that were made on that date. You will also identify throughout the code itself what those changes were. We'll see that coming up. We've also got eye-catcher comments. These are comments just to catch your eye as you're scanning through the code, because when you're looking through the code, you might not see something because it's small, but if you put a box around it, then it becomes an eye-catcher. You might need to explain particular pieces of code that are very tricky. A lot of times, code is totally self-explanatory, in which case you should not document it. But if the code is a bit tricky and uses like multiple tables and subscripts and indexes and fancy calculations, you should really describe what that code is doing. Because you're not going to be the only person who has to do maintenance on this. There will be other programmers who have to do maintenance. And you very well may end up doing maintenance on somebody else's code. That is, making changes to incorporate new standards and new functionality. Anytime there's an update in the code, you should comment that. So comment any code updates. And every single paragraph in your procedure division should be commented, should have comments in it. Now, some of these things you're not quite aware of yet, but as we go through, you're going to see how some of these things work. Here is an initial comment box example. Following my identification division, I have a comment box, and it includes the purpose of the program, a listing of the input files, in this case there's only one, a listing of the output files, in this case again there's only one, a history of revisions, and in this case I've indicated on 2008, May 3rd, Mary Abdul revised the comments in this program. Following that I have a few spaces and then the environment division and etc., the rest of the program. So here's an eye-catcher one. Notice that in my working storage I have this thing called work areas, and there's just a box around it. Work areas is indicating that following this comment I have a bunch of work areas. These are not input, they are not output, they are intermediate fields that I'm using as my program is processing. My first one is some work constants, in which case I have a tax rate, a company name, a company address, things that probably won't change as I'm running my program. Also a bunch of switches to indicate whether something is good or bad or EOF is a common thing that stands for end of file. We'll see that in the last module of this course. Down here I have another comment, and in this comment you'll notice I have the double asterisks in the left side, but all the way on the right I have the comment. I want that comment not to interfere with my looking at the code. It's a small comment, but it's an indication that this flag is going to change in 2011 to something else. So that's sort of a warning for people as they're processing this program. Each division should have some sort of a comment. Actually, this is not the division. Each paragraph should have some sort of a comment. So my main routine is a paragraph, and I have a double-boxed, that's just the way I do it, a double-boxed comment that describes what the main routine does. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. It checks to see if a COM area exists. If the CA or COM area exists, it receives a screen of data from the user. If no COM area, then it sends an empty screen to the user to be filled in. So this is my comment about the main routine. Then I have an eye-catcher routine around main routine. Main routine is not commented, but by putting asterisks before and after it, it makes it stand out. That's not so common, that kind of a highlight, but it's kind of neat, and you can do it if you wish. But the comment box that precedes main, definitely I would do that. Some people put this comment box just before the main paragraph, and some people put it just after the main paragraph. But it needs to be associated with that paragraph. I have another comment on here. In this case, I used not asterisks, but dashes and vertical bars. The dashes are known as hyphens, the vertical bars are known as pipe, P-I-P-E symbols. So I'm indicating right here that I made a change in 1995, and I added this move DFH COM area line. This should match up with the description in my maintenance log in the very first comment box, right after the identification division. There should be an entry there that says, in 1995, Mary Abdil, MEA, Mary Abdil, made some changes. Most people use initials here and the full name in the initial comment box. Here's some more. Here's a first-time routine, and I'm describing what the first-time routine does. Consider using lower or mixed case here so that it doesn't interfere with the code. Of course, if your code is in lower or mixed case, it really doesn't give you much of an advantage, but it's a possibility. And here again, I've highlighted my first-time paragraph. Here's another comment that describes some processing. I put it over to the right because I don't want it to interfere with my looking at the code. You are now ready to complete the workshop for this module of this course. If you have not yet done so, follow the setup instructions described at the end of the module, Your First Enterprise COBOL Program. You may now complete the workshops described in the document named identificationdivision.pdf. And when you're finished, compare your solutions with the ones provided. I don't expect your solutions to exactly match mine. I expect you to be creative and knowledgeable based on your particular background and your industry. So your comments could very well be different because your industry is different from the one I've been working in, perhaps. However, your programs should still work. They should still provide the correct output. They should still compile, clean, and run, and they should be well structured. So congratulations on writing a COBOL program that is well documented and has a clean and complete identification division. Again, I strongly recommend that you complete these workshops because they do solidify the learning. You have now finished the module on identification division, load libraries, and documentation. You have seen all of the paragraphs that you can code in the identification division. You have seen how the identification division program ID matches with the CSEC name in your load library member, and you have seen documentation that begins with your identification division and is used throughout your program. A lot of companies recommend that you have perhaps as much as 20 to 30% of your lines of code should be comments, should be documentation. Make sure it's at least 15% because documentation is an important part of writing a COBOL program. If you have any questions about any of the information covered in this presentation, please use the question and comment box. And thank you for joining me.